Bron Breakker just did what nobody else had the guts to do, and it exposed WWE's corruption. Bron Breakker walked into the Lion's Den on Monday Night Raw and confronted Jon Moxley face-to-face about being the mystery attacker, and what happened next proves that WWE has been protecting Moxley this entire time. While everyone else in the locker room was living in fear, while management was pretending to investigate, while victims were being told to wait for answers, Bron Breakker took matters into his own hands and forced a confrontation that WWE didn't want to happen. And Moxley's reaction, combined with WWE's immediate response, exposed a conspiracy that goes all the way to the top of the company. Let me break down exactly what happened, because this was the most intense and real moment on WWE television in years, and the company is already trying to bury the story and control the narrative. Monday Night Raw was about halfway through the show when Bron Breakker's music hit unexpectedly. This wasn't scheduled. Breakker wasn't supposed to be on Raw that night. He marched down to the ring with a microphone in hand and fury in his eyes. Breakker stood in the center of that ring and said, "I'm sick of waiting for WWE management to do their jobs. I'm sick of watching wrestlers get attacked week after week while Adam Pearce sits in his office doing nothing. And I'm especially sick of everyone pretending like we don't know who's behind these attacks. Jon Moxley, I know you're in this building. Get your ass out here right now and face me like a man instead of hiding in the shadows like a coward." The crowd went absolutely insane. Nobody expected Bron Breakker to call out Moxley so directly. Backstage sources later confirmed that WWE management was in chaos because this wasn't scripted. Breakker went into business for himself, and he was forcing WWE's hand on an issue they'd been trying to manage quietly. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Just Breakker standing in the ring, daring Moxley to show himself. The tension was unbearable. And then, from the crowd, Jon Moxley appeared. He wasn't wearing his Mystery Man disguise. He was in jeans and a leather jacket, looking like the Moxley everyone remembers. He jumped the barricade and slid into the ring, and the two men stood face to face. The size difference was immediately apparent. Bron Breakker is a monster at 6'1" and 250 pounds of pure muscle. Moxley, while tough and experienced, is giving up significant size and strength. But Moxley didn't back down. He got right in Breakker's face with that unhinged look in his eyes that's made him famous. Breakker spoke first. "Everyone in the back knows it's you. The tattoos, the fighting style, the way you move, it's obvious. But WWE won't do anything about it because they're negotiating with you to come back full-time. So they let you terrorize their roster while protecting you from consequences. Well, I'm not management, and I'm not going to wait for permission. If you want to attack people, attack me right now. Face to face. Or admit you're just a coward who can only fight when people's backs are turned." Moxley's response was chilling. He grabbed Breakker's microphone and said, "You want the truth, kid? Yeah, it was me. I've been attacking people. And you know why? Because WWE needs a wake-up call. Everyone's gotten soft, comfortable, complacent. I came back to remind people what real wrestling looks like, what real violence looks like. And if that means putting a few people on the injured list, so be it." There it is. Jon Moxley just admitted on live television that he's been the mystery attacker. No more speculation, no more theories, straight from his mouth. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer for the honesty or boo for the confession. But before anyone could process what Moxley said, Bron Breakker tackled him and started throwing bombs. These weren't worked punches for television. Breakker was throwing legitimate strikes. He was furious, and he was taking out weeks of frustration on the man who'd been terrorizing the locker room. Moxley fought back with elbows and headbutts, and suddenly we had a real fight happening in the WWE ring. Security rushed out to separate them, but here's where it gets really interesting. WWE security grabbed Bron Breakker and pulled him off Moxley. They didn't arrest Moxley. They didn't remove Moxley from the building. They protected Moxley and restrained Breakker. The person who'd been committing assaults for months got protected while the person defending the locker room got restrained. That visual told you everything about WWE's priorities. They don't care about justice or safety. They care about protecting Jon Moxley because they see him as a valuable asset for their future programming. Bron Breakker exposed their corruption and they punished him for it. Backstage after this segment, sources say that Triple H was screaming at Bron Breakker, "You don't go into business for yourself. You don't force confrontations that we're not ready for. You could have ruined months of planning." And Breakker reportedly shot back, "Your planning has left the entire locker room vulnerable. Someone had to do something, and since you won't, I did." That is the leadership WWE needs but doesn't deserve. Bron Breakker, at just 26 years old, showed more courage and integrity than the entire WWE management structure. While executives were making backroom deals with Moxley, Breakker actually stood up for his fellow wrestlers. But here's where this situation gets even more infuriating. After Raw went off the air, WWE officials met with Jon Moxley and essentially apologized to him for Bron Breakker's actions. They told Moxley that Breakker shouldn't have called him out and that they'd deal with him. WWE apologized to the person who'd been assaulting their roster. Meanwhile, Bron Breakker was given a formal reprimand for unprofessional conduct and violating company policy. The man who stood up to a serial attacker got punished while the serial attacker got an apology. The system is broken beyond repair. Let's examine Jon Moxley's confession because his justification for the attacks is nonsense. WWE needs a wake-up call. Everyone's gotten soft. That's the excuse of a bully trying to rationalize inexcusable behavior. Moxley isn't some vigilante trying to toughen up the roster, he's a bitter veteran taking out his frustrations on younger talent. And his claim that he wants to show people real wrestling and real violence, that's code for "I'm too broken down to have good matches anymore, so I'm going to rely on weapons and brawling." Moxley knows his best days are behind him, so he's trying to reposition himself as this hardcore legend who's above traditional wrestling. But the truth is that Jon Moxley is jealous of the current WWE roster. Guys like Bron Breakker, who are younger, more athletic, and have brighter futures than Moxley ever will again. So Moxley attacked them to try to diminish their shine and make himself seem more important by comparison. The locker room reaction to Bron Breakker's confrontation has been mixed, and that division is telling. Some wrestlers are privately praising Breakker for having the courage to confront Moxley when management wouldn't. They're saying finally, someone stood up for us, and viewing Breakker as a real locker room leader. But other wrestlers, particularly veterans who are friendly with WWE management, are criticizing Breakker for going into business for himself and not following protocol. These are the same wrestlers who benefit from WWE's corrupt system where certain people get protected regardless of their behavior. And you know what that division reveals? It shows that some wrestlers have been conditioned to accept abuse and corruption as long as they get their paycheck. They'd rather follow protocol than stand up for what's right. They're complicit in WWE's toxic culture. Let's talk about Bron Breakker's motivation because understanding why he did this is important. Breakker comes from the Steiner family, a wrestling dynasty known for toughness and not backing down from anyone. Rick and Scott Steiner would have never tolerated a situation where someone was attacking wrestlers and management did nothing. Bron was raised with old-school wrestling values: handle your business, protect your brothers, don't wait for permission to do what's right. Those values are alien in modern WWE where everything is corporate-controlled and politically calculated. But Breakker doesn't care about corporate politics, he cares about what's right. And make no mistake, what Breakker did was dangerous for his career. WWE could bury him for this. They could take away his push, feed him to other wrestlers in losing efforts, make an example of him to show other wrestlers what happens when you don't fall in line. But Breakker did it anyway because he has integrity. Compare that to someone like Roman Reigns, who knew about Moxley and used that information for leverage instead of protecting the roster. Or compare it to Seth Rollins, who's been complaining about the attacks but hasn't taken any real action. Bron Breakker, the youngest guy in the conversation, showed the most courage. Now let's discuss WWE's response to this situation because it reveals their true priorities. Instead of praising Breakker for exposing Moxley, instead of finally addressing the attacks head-on, WWE is trying to contain the damage. They're having emergency meetings about how to spin this. And the spin they've decided on is disgusting. WWE is going to position Bron Breakker as the hothead who overreacted to a misunderstanding. They're going to downplay Moxley's confession as working the crowd and claim that the attacks were part of a larger storyline that Breakker ruined. In other words, WWE is going to gaslight everyone. They're going to rewrite history and pretend that Moxley wasn't actually admitting to the attacks, he was just playing his character. They're going to make Breakker look wrong for taking Moxley at his word. It's manipulation of the highest order. And the wrestling media is going to help WWE with this spin. They're already publishing articles about how Bron Breakker broke kayfabe and WWE is reportedly unhappy with Breakker's actions. They're not investigating WWE's protection of Moxley or questioning why management has done nothing about the attacks. They're just serving as WWE's mouthpiece. Real journalism would be asking, why has WWE allowed these attacks to continue? What negotiations are happening with Moxley that make him untouchable? Who in management decided to protect Moxley over the safety of the roster? Why was Bron Breakker punished for doing what management should have done weeks ago? But those questions won't be asked because wrestling journalism is dead. Let's examine the legal implications because WWE has created a massive liability issue. By admitting they knew Moxley was the attacker and choosing not to stop him, WWE has opened themselves up to lawsuits from every person Moxley attacked. Those wrestlers can claim WWE knowingly allowed a dangerous situation to continue. And now that Moxley has confessed on live television, there's no deniability. He admitted it. WWE can't claim they didn't know anymore. Every future attack that happens can be directly attributed to WWE's negligence in stopping Moxley after his confession. But WWE will use their ironclad contracts and arbitration clauses to prevent wrestlers from suing. They'll threaten anyone who tries to take legal action with blacklisting and career destruction. That's how they've operated for decades, using their power to silence victims and avoid accountability. Here's what should happen next: Jon Moxley should be arrested for assault. He confessed on camera to attacking multiple people. That's enough evidence for prosecution. WWE should be investigated by labor authorities for creating an unsafe work environment. Bron Breakker should be praised and promoted for his courage. But here's what will happen: Moxley will sign a lucrative WWE contract. WWE will book Breakker vs. Moxley in a match at a pay-per-view. Breakker will probably be asked to lose to teach him a lesson about respecting the system. The attacks will be retroactively justified as building toward this feud, and everyone will move on like nothing wrong happened. That's the WWE playbook. Create or allow terrible situations, then turn them into profit-generating storylines while pretending the real-life harm doesn't matter. It's exploitation disguised as entertainment. The Bron Breakker vs. Jon Moxley dynamic is actually perfect for what WWE needs but doesn't realize. Breakker represents the future, young, talented, full of potential, willing to stand up for what's right. Moxley represents the past, a bitter veteran clinging to relevance, willing to hurt others to maintain his status. This should be positioned as the changing of the guard. The new generation standing up to the old guard's corruption and violence. Breakker should destroy Moxley in their match and send a message that the future won't tolerate the past's behavior. That's the story that needs to be told. But WWE will probably do the opposite. They'll have Moxley go over Breakker to establish him as a top heel. They'll sacrifice the young talent to put over the aging veteran. They'll repeat the same mistakes they've made for decades of holding back the future to cater to the past. I want your opinion on Bron Breakker's courageous confrontation. Do you think Breakker was right to call out Moxley even though it wasn't approved? Should WWE be praising Breakker instead of punishing him? Is Jon Moxley's confession enough to press charges? Should WWE management be fired for protecting Moxley? Comment below and let me know. Should Bron Breakker be viewed as a locker room leader for standing up to Moxley? Should wrestlers support Breakker publicly? Should Jon Moxley be banned from WWE for his confession? Should there be an independent investigation into WWE's handling of the attacks? Tell me what you think needs to happen. This is one of the most important moments in recent WWE history. Bron Breakker confronted Jon Moxley about being the mystery attacker and forced a confession that WWE didn't want. Moxley admitted to the attacks on live television, and WWE's response was to protect Moxley and punish Breakker. This proves the system is corrupt from top to bottom. Hit that like button if you think Bron Breakker is a hero. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand WWE's corruption. Subscribe to WrestlingNewsCC for coverage that exposes the truth. And drop a comment supporting Bron Breakker for his courage. Bron Breakker did what nobody else had the guts to do. He confronted Jon Moxley directly and exposed WWE's protection of a serial attacker. Moxley confessed to the attacks, and WWE responded by punishing the victim instead of the perpetrator. This is everything wrong with WWE's corporate culture in one segment. WrestlingNewsCC stands with Bron Breakker. He showed real courage and leadership while WWE management showed cowardice and corruption. Jon Moxley needs to face real consequences for his confession, not a lucrative contract. And WWE needs to be held accountable for protecting him. This is about more than wrestling, this is about basic workplace safety and corporate responsibility. We won't stop demanding justice until the system changes.